Growing up, I was always an athlete. I played basketball, soccer, and ran track.
Finish strong!
Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while. Heaven can wait, we're only watching the skies. Hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. Are you gonna drop the
Let's go, Ben! Ben, to the ball,
Let us live forever. We don't have the power, but we never say never. Sitting in a sandpit, the music's for the sad man. Can you imagine when the race is won? Turn our faces into the sun. Praising our leaders, getting in tune. The music's playing by the madman. Forever young, to be forever young. Do you really want to live forever? Forever, who will never, forever young. I want to be forever.
Let's go home,
young. Do you really want to live forever? Forever young. Some are like water, some are like the heat. Some are a melody and some are the beat. Some are all eternal, but all will be gone. Why don't they stay young? It's so hard to get on to without a cause. I don't want to perish like a phoenix. You said moments of the sun, moments of forever. So many adventures couldn't happen today. So many songs we forgot to play. So many dreams we didn't know the moon. Forever young. I want to be forever young. Do you really want to live forever?
Go, Ben, go, go, go! Go, Ben, go, go!
To be forever young.
Go, Ben, go!
Really want to live forever. Forever, forever, forever young. I wanna be forever young. Do you really want to live
I also loved playing basketball, and was alright at it.
You ready? Let's go. Yeah. For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of.
Go!
I had skills, but injuries plagued me pretty much every step of the way. My first real major injury playing high school sports occurred during my freshman year of track and field. I had this non-stop, constant ache in my lower leg and was eventually diagnosed with chronic exertional compartment syndrome. I was worried about my leg, so I began to dig a little bit deeper into my injury and what it meant. And while doing so, I realized I kind of liked learning about the injury. I found it pretty interesting. But mostly, I did research about the nature of the injury since I was interested in returning to competition as fast as I possibly could. I was eager to race on the track. I learned that chronic exertional compartment syndrome is a muscle and nerve condition that causes weakness and pain in the lower leg. Some common symptoms of chronic exertional compartment syndrome include pain, strange tingling, and chronic sensations of weakness in the lower leg. Luckily, after a few weeks, I was ready to return to the track, and so I did. That summer, after my freshman year, I even competed in the Maccabia Games, otherwise known as the Jewish Olympics, in Israel. But then, during the first game of my sophomore basketball season, I found myself injured once again.
Percent pleasure, 50% pain, 100%
Yeah, that was a video of me breaking my wrist. These were my casts. My injury was originally diagnosed as a fracture of the scaphoid or navicular bone of the wrist. This is a type of wrist fracture commonly diagnosed after a fall on an outstretched hand, as was shown in the video of me falling. There are two pulls to the scaphoid bone: the proximal pull, which is the pull that is closer to the thumb, symbolized by the letter D in the image, and the distal pull, which is the area of the scaphoid closer to the base of the wrist or further away from the thumb, and that is symbolized by the letter P on the image shown. The distal pull of the scaphoid receives very little blood flow, significantly less than the proximal pull of the scaphoid. Hence, fractures of the distal pull of the scaphoid typically require surgical intervention. On the other hand, fractures of the proximal pull are usually okay with just conservative treatment, which is casting. The fracture I personally sustained happened to be right in the middle of the scaphoid bone, which is kind of a gray area. Some of those fractures require surgical intervention, and other times the patient can get by conservatively. My doctor actually admitted that he was heavily considering surgical intervention for my fracture, but we opted to go the conservative route. So I was to sport a cast for approximately 2 months, and the doctor predicted I would actually have to miss the entire basketball season. Of course, I was devastated. But after weeks and weeks of rigorous therapy, I was actually able to make a return to the court with 5 games left in our season. And they actually went pretty well. And so basketball season fed directly into my sophomore track season, which was a magnificent season. I ended up qualifying for CCS finals in the 800-meter race and was one of only 3 non-seniors in all of CCS to do so. But I certainly wasn't finished in my mind. I wanted to keep improving. I wanted to be recruited by top-tier colleges. So my junior year, in preparation for the all-important junior track season for recruitment, I joined the cross-country team for the first time in high school, hoping to build a strong aerobic base for track. I started the season strong, racing well and placing high in races. But little did I know. Soon, I developed a persistent mid-thigh ache that any movement of mine seemed to exacerbate. Based on my prior readings, I conducted a self-examination. What gave it away was the fulcrum test. I placed one arm under my affected thigh, while my other arm pushed down from the knee. Immediately, I felt a shooting pain. I knew exactly what I was feeling: a stress fracture. I relayed this concern of mine to my general physician. He then conducted a few non-specific tests, dismissed my assertions, and brushed off my pain as an unconcerning overuse injuries. But I was unconvinced, so I arranged to see an orthopedic surgeon. He sent me for an MRI, which revealed a high-risk stress fracture of the femoral shaft, or midway through my thigh bone, that would land me on crutches for 2 months and sideline me for approximately half a year. At this point, I felt like I was Garson, Inez, or Estelle in No Exit, trapped in the room that we may interpret to be hell. In a way, I was in my own hell. As a competitive guy, I just wanted to train and race, but my injuries kept haunting me. They were my hell, it seemed to me that I had no escape from them. But anyways, with time on my hands, without competition, I dove into research regarding femoral stress fractures. I learned that there are two main types of femoral stress fracture. The first type, a stress fracture of the femoral neck, is the slightly more common type and is also known as a stress fracture of the hip. These stress fractures very often require surgical intervention. The second main type of femoral stress fracture is known as a stress fracture of the femoral shaft. It occurs approximately midway through the femur or thigh bone, and this is actually the stress fracture that I had. Some symptoms of a femoral stress fracture include increased and severe pain in the thigh region, especially during activity, groin pain, pain when unloading the leg or essentially lifting the leg off of the ground, and sharp pain when dangling the leg off of a chair, bench, stool, bed, or anything of that sort. The primary causes of the femoral stress fracture is often just overuse in activity or a sharp increase in activity levels over a short period of time. The recovery time for a femoral neck stress fracture is often 6 months or more, up to a year in some cases, and return to sports is often a gradual process. I was eventually able to return to the track for the second half of our season, and even made my way back to CCS finals, this time with the 4x400 meter relay team. Now, during the beginning of my senior year, I was preparing for my senior basketball season and was in terrific shape. But then, with my luck, during my first practice of the season, I managed to hurt myself once again. And this time it was worse than ever. I had gone up for a layup aggressively and in traffic, and was pushed while in the air, putting me off balance. Instead of landing on 2 feet, I landed on my right leg only, which happened to be fully extended. Immediately, I felt my knee shift. I went down in immense pain. After a minute, I looked at my knee, but it didn't seem dislocated. Shit, I thought. I just tore my ACL. And a few days later, my MRI results came back, confirming a full rupture of the ACL. Once again, I was heartbroken. I felt like Sisyphus from the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to follow the same meaningless task for life. It went like this, in a pattern. 1. Compete. 2. Get injured. 3. Rehab. 4. Repeat. And just like that, my sports career seemed like the perfect metaphor for the absurdity of life. But once again, I began to vigorously research about ACL injuries, ruptures, and reconstructions. I learned that the ACL is one of the 4 main ligaments in the knee, and that ACL ruptures are perhaps the most common injury of the knee. ACL ruptures commonly occur in cutting and jumping sports, such as basketball, soccer, and football. Some of the primary causes of ACL ruptures include falling on one outstretched leg or sudden twisting or cutting motions. Some of the most common symptoms of an ACL rupture include a feeling of the knee shifting sideways or becoming dislocated during the event of the injury, subsequent knee swelling, knee instability, and severe knee pain. Unless one does not plan to ever return to playing sports again, ACL reconstruction surgery is virtually always necessary. To reconstruct the ACL, basically a new ACL needs to be inserted into the knee. Surgeons use autografts, which is tissue from one's own body, and allografts, or donor tissue, to do this. Autografts may be harvested from the hamstring tendon, as was done during my surgery, the patellar tendon, or the quadriceps tendon. Each graft has its own upsides and downsides, including pain at the donor site and weakness at the donor site following surgery. Overall though, my surgery went well, and my rehab still continues today. And along the way, I really did enjoy learning about ACL reconstructions and about really all the other injuries I had and researched. As a runner, my hopes of recruitment into top-tier college programs cracked along with, well, practically my entire body. But my injuries also strengthened my interest in sports medicine and resulted in an important realization. At the end of the day, we know our own bodies better than anyone. I was proud that my personal research prior to my injuries allowed me to pinpoint their causes more accurately, and that my research allowed me to quickly progress through the rehab processes. So yes, I might never be a professional athlete, but I've learned that my love for sports growing up can manifest as a passion for the sciences behind athletic competition. I hope you guys enjoyed my story, and maybe learned a little something about the few major sports injuries that I told you about.